Good morning, everyone. Welcome to EIPIP Meeting 71. I have shared agenda in chat and we have added a few topics for discussion. The first few sub-items are issues taken from the EIP GitHub repository. Maybe we can start from there. So the first one is to propose policy last call changes shall be separated from the PR to move to final. I guess this was added by Victor, but I don't see Victor on the call right now.
Oh, I think this already is policy. Maybe we just need to write it down somewhere. It's just that when you make a big change to an EIP and last call, that should restart the timer.
Right. So part of this was also suggested by you in the last meeting with the EIP editing office hour, I guess. The person has to make a new PR to make it to final. I mean, like a separate PR from the last call changes. Is my understanding correct?
Yeah, it's not necessarily just a separate PR. It's just that if you make a large change to an EIP in last call, it should restart the last call timer.
Okay.
Yeah. So like you have to let it sit for another 2 weeks kind of thing.
All right, so we can just mention this as an outcome for this issue and probably close this issue, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. The next one is hide stagnant and withdrawn EIPs from the EIP list. Issue number is 6027. Any thoughts from people here?
It's a bad idea.
For some reason, I'm also in favor of that. I mean, favor of it's a bad idea. Yeah, I mean, why do we want to hide stagnant and withdrawn? We just want to share all the proposals statuses, right? Yeah, but any other thoughts?
Stagnant, especially, the author doesn't necessarily have anything to do with that. Google doesn't have anything to do with that. So you can just wind up with EIPs that have gone to stagnant. They're still out there in Google. They're still historically interesting. Google says, here it is. You go to that page and where is it? Or else Google just stops indexing it and it disappears from history.
Any other thought?
I don't think it's to hide the actual EIP itself, just the list. But yeah, I can see how that would make it harder to index it. I'd be okay with displaying them separately. I think we might already do that. Yeah, we do. So yeah, I don't think we need to make this change.
This is a reason I always prefer the IETF policy of everything's the draft and then it has a status, but we already lost that. No point going back.
I think there is also a pull request associated with this particular issue. I'm sharing here the link in chat if people would like to review. And yeah. It looks like the proposer is also in favor of creating a toggle button instead of hiding it all from the dashboard. Yeah.
Yeah. Then it's just a UI issue.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So is it safe to assume that the group?
I mean, it's a real point. The table of contents puts them towards the end. You can.
All right, looks like people are generally not in favor of this proposal to like hide stagnant and withdrawal EIPs from the EIP list. So maybe we can leave a comment over there. The next sub-item is changes to final EIP. So I have found a bunch of EIPs which are already into final statuses, and authors have requested certain changes. Sometimes the original author and sometimes any contributor from the community. So I have listed all of them. The first one here for reference is number 6104. I'm sharing here link in the chat. Generally speaking, we are aware that EIP editors are not very much in favor of having a final proposal getting updated, but these are available in the form of pull requests. So any comments, thoughts, and yeah, what to do with the PR would be nice to have.
Yes, I think this one is. Oh, this is an author that approved it. So this is probably just waiting on me to merge it.
Okay. So the next one is a change which is recommended for EIP 20. Obviously, there are some strong opinion about it, but if people from this group may also add their thoughts, feedback. So EIP 20 is like a very old EIP, which has been widely accepted. So main concern here is to have it, have these changes added to EIP 20 altogether, or maybe have a new proposal instead.
If it's, I haven't actually looked through the EIP, the PR yet, but if it's just formatting changes, then I'm fine with making them. I think that's okay. But yeah.
I think, Matt, you had a strong opinion on that. Maybe if you would like to add why you think it is not a good idea to have new recommendation fit in for these proposals.
Sorry, new recommendation for which proposal?
The pull request number is 6038 for updating EIP 20. Renovate to fit most current EIP 1 recommendations.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that we should be updating old EIPs and ERCs.
I'm fine with that too.
I mean,
Not-
occasionally like smaller changes, I guess, is okay, but I think this is a pretty large change, especially like this is a extremely widely read EIP. It would be weird to make large changes to it.
Which PR are we talking about?
6038. You can find the link in the chat.
Yeah, I found it. There were a few other links, so I wasn't sure. Look at those changes.
So it is about the usage of license changes with the proposal which has been recently merged.
Yeah, we sure don't want to mess with the ERC 20 more than necessary.
Yeah, so these changes definitely go further than the minimum required to meet the current standards. So, like as written, I wouldn't approve this.
So do we want to have further edits in the pull request, or do we want to have not include these changes in EIP 20 altogether?
I think it's fairly nuanced. I can make some comments on the actual PR. Like I think moving like simple summary to description, I think that's a perfectly fine thing to do. But changing it from like solidity 0.4.17 to 0.8.17, I think is way out of line for what we should be doing. What's everybody else's opinion?
Hmm.
I agree.
All right. It seems most of the editors are in agreement that we should not go for the bigger changes to EIPs, which are already into final statuses. So for this, we can maybe drop this pull request. We can close this with comment.
Mhm.
Very well. The next change.
Slow down, slow
Sorry,
down. This does bring up an interesting issue because the Solidity code is out of date. Yeah, people use this to build on, and we're giving them a version of Solidity that won't compile anymore, possibly. But I don't know in general how we want to handle that, or just leave it to the user.
Why wouldn't it compile?
I don't know yet. Over time, Solidity versions are not backwards compatible.
Yeah, like sometimes they add the call data memory thing,
Right,
and old
but-
interfaces don't. Yeah.
Oh. I mean, I guess because they've pegged the version there that there's no need to update it. It's like you should
Well, yeah.
compile. Yeah.
Yeah, it's you have to tag the version, or you don't know what language you're looking at with Solidity. So yeah, it's generally unfortunate we use Solidity for this sort of specification, but I just don't know if we should have a way to update these things once they get grotesquely out of date.
I'm also, yeah, I agree with that. I don't know what to do.
Yeah, I guess it could take a new PR, but that seems silly when nothing changed. Nothing changed. I guess it's a matter of just if the Solidity gets to where it just won't compile without, really obvious changes. And I don't know Solidity well enough to judge if this is still going to compile okay.
Okay, is it safe to summarize that the current PR in the current form may not be able to merge, like editors do not have consensus on that. However, if we are changing the Solidity version, it may require a new pull request to change, or maybe a new pull request can be sent out for further consideration.
Yeah, it's just a dangerous thing. Making sure that the new Solidity really does specify the same thing as the old Solidity when things are not backwards compatible and there is no formal specification for Solidity. So and the alternative argument is just leave it be, because that you can figure out from that what the author's intent was.
Okay. So with this meeting, we can, I'm trying to summarize it, and I will add the summary to this agenda only for whatever we have discussed. Obviously, that will be also noted in the notes. But for this particular pull request, we do not get a general consensus here. However, we are considering updating solidity for older proposals, not specific to EIP 20, but in general.
I'm not saying we should. I'm just saying there is an issue here to keep in mind. And I don't. There's no way we can go back through all of the EAPs and update their solidity, but it is an issue, and especially if the authors of an EIP feel a need. But it doesn't seem right to alter a final EIP. I'm just pointing out there's an issue, and it may take a new IP to do it. We may in the future want to separate that out. This is a fairly unusual EIP, I think, in that way, but.
Right, maybe we can create an issue on EIP GitHub to discuss about updating solidity in earlier proposals and
Yeah, I'm
collect
doing
more
that right now.
thoughts. Okay, thank you, Sam.
Yeah, I don't know if the author of this one wants to sort of take that on as trimming this one back somehow, keeping a discussion going, or if having this one directed. It's our panda here anyway. Is he on the call? No, he's
No,
not.
unfortunately, no.
Yeah, so we should kick this down the road until he's here to talk about it.
Very well. And we are already creating, I mean, Sam is already creating an issue for further discussion for updating solidity concern. Moving on to the next pull request, which is there for updating EIP 721, which is again in final status. A pull request number is 6012. Any thoughts and comments on that, PR? This pull request is by the original author. It looks like, yeah, there are some people are in favor and some are not. Yeah, if we don't have any thought right away, I am also trying to just share these PRs here, so editors may take a look even after the call. And the last one here is pull request number. Sorry, yeah, please go ahead, Greg.
I'm just still trying to figure out. Well, this is another final one that we don't want to touch. I'm still trying to figure out why he really wants to touch it.
All right.
Yeah,
there's
a broken link. That's basically what it comes down to.
There's a lot of changes here for a broken link.
We're looking at 6012 or.
Yeah,
6012 is for 71.
Yeah. Just turn off. If you hit the three dots on the top right, you can turn off the annotations. It's just the bot complaining because it's a really old EIP.
That cleans it up. Thank you.
No problem. The only change is the link down at the bottom.
Is this a normative link?
Let's see. It is a link to another project that implements Safe ERC20. It doesn't look like it's part of the spec.
I don't care.
I'd rather just remove the link. I think that would be.
It's final. I don't want to touch it.
Okay.
It's not normative. It's not required to understand it. If somebody's really motivated,
They can find it.
They can find it. And this is why we want to severely limit outside links.
All
This,
right.
yeah.
If Greg is saying to not apply a PR, I think I'm empowered to
Well-
just close this PR. I think we're good.
Well, no, I mean, we've been around and around an outside
Yeah.
link. This is an example of where they go wrong, but it's also an example of where it's not normative, so it's not really a problem. It would be much better. It doesn't look like there's much of anything except a link to get to this anyway, but I don't, I mean, it just looks like, yeah, it's a link to some code master. That's no good. The master keeps changing. It should be a link to a particular commit. He still hasn't fixed that anyway. Oh no, he finally has a blob to a particular commit. Yeah, I see what he's trying to do. He's trying to fix an old mistake.
Yeah.
Okay, this is slightly more on the edge. And this is 721. I mean, we've got a whole fucking industry built on this thing.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry I didn't review this sooner, but let me go look at that. Where is that referenced in the text? We have a concept of errata, but we have no process for it. Yeah. So it's long past time perhaps to just get our act together on errata, and then we can handle these things. Yeah, because this is an old one and it's dense with references. Yeah, this is harder than I think, because
It's all right. We don't have to decide on it right away. I just wanted to bring it to attention so editors may leave their comment and feedback if it is missed by any chance. And if we can quickly come up on decision for anything listed here, that would be really nice to have.
yeah. Okay. This is also an example of why outside links are useful in motivations and rationales, because he's basically going through existing and prior art in the rationale. And it's in standards work generally a good idea to take account of prior art when you're standardizing something. So without the links, he's just going to be making bald assertions about prior art with no links at all. So I'm really inclined to take this as an opportunity to define a process for errata, and then these can be handled as errors without actually modifying the final text.
I mean, I'm down to, have some thoughts about errata and what we're allowed to change, and yeah.
So I'm seeing here, I mean, it's old, so things aren't broken out, but he's got, some standards he's referencing. I think some of that's actually normative, some issues, various discussions, and the others clearly not normative, but a lot of it prior art that he's trying to incorporate either directly. Yeah, I mean, like he's referring ERC 165. That kind of looks to be normative. Yeah, I'm really inclined to throw it back to the authors once we've got an errata process and fix this one up somehow, because it's a very important ERP. It's important that people can understand it. And it's worth trying to sort out those links that really are going to cause a problem, understanding it, and which ones can rot without it being an issue. Because at least as I've discussed it, what's in the specification has to be normative, and what's not in the specification is not normative. And this EIP, they're mixed together.
I'm tempted for this one just to say that it doesn't hurt the understandability of the EIP to let this link rot. So we just leave it. But we mentioned that, you know, we might have a more formal errata process and we can revisit the issue at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You're all right with that, Matt?
That sounds good to me.
Yeah, I would kick back to William that there is an issue here, but it's worth, try to sort out which of these links are normative and which aren't.
Yeah.
Because the ones that are normative, we need to keep an eye on.
Yep. I think maybe we can have an issue for one of the upcoming meetings for the process of errata, and we can have more discussion on how to define the process. And for this PR, if you can maybe leave feedback that to distinguish between normative and non-normative links, that would be nice if Williams or the author responds to that very well. Otherwise, we can let it be there for some more time.
Makes sense.
All right. With that, maybe we can move on to the item number 2. Oh, sorry. Before item number 2, there is one last final EIP related discussion needed, which is for pull request number 5877. So this is for another final EIP 155. This is again a very old proposal authored by Vitalik for simple replay attack protection. So the proposer is willing to add additional line for Ganache GUI private chains. Okay, there's a comment in the chat that one should not go in. Okay.
So is this this is a list of the existing chains at the time, right? Okay,
Yeah, because Coven clearly may not be there anymore, right?
Yeah, so yeah, we aren't going to do this. There's no way we're modifying E155. It probably shouldn't have had a list in it in the first place. And EIPs are not the best place to maintain lists. So I'm just going to close this unless somebody objects.
Any objection from present group of EIP editors? for closing the PR. I should be more clear here. All right, it does not look like people are opposing. Anyway, we have heard consensus from editors that generally they are not in favor of modifying the existing EIPs. And as you mentioned, this is not a good place to maintain table. So yeah, we can probably go ahead and close this one. Moving on to item number 2, this is part of continued from earlier meeting discussions because we have discussed this in the past. However, there is a new proposal on the table. It's a straw man proposal proposed by Victor. I suppose Victor is here if you would like to maybe summarize your proposal, and yeah, people can share their thoughts and opinion.
Yeah, so the idea is that I heard from various authors and editors that there's no clear criteria for advancing status. Some would like a very easy way to go through to get to final. Something going to final is too fast. Something going to final some of the EIP didn't have enough consensus or demonstrated interest to go to final. So this is an attempt to formalize what it means as a criteria for each status. And the highlight is that for what we already know, core of obviously require client implementations and I understand the implied level of what it means to client implementation is multiple client implementation and getting adopted in the hard fork. But when it comes to ERCs, network, and interfaces, there's no hard requirement. And in the discussion, some raised concerns that some EIPs go into final too fast. We also saw things like EIP 712, and that was like going into final status prematurely. It has a lot of interest. It's being widely adopted, but it's editorially a disaster. We all have seen that. I also recently discovered things like 3475, which has had a lot of editorial issues even after it passes the final. So just want to kind of propose something that people can agree on. One of the contentious ideas to attack, I think, is whether we want to require also implementations for network interface and ERC, just as if we require for the core. I'm personally in favor of that because I think a standard without multiple implementations is not counted as a standard and it doesn't make sense to finalize them if no one really cares or care enough to implement and deploy it. The other thing that people propose, I heard that is a lower bound, which I think Poja here is in favor, and some of recently another authors in the same thread propose a upper bound, which is deadline to move to the next step. So I just want to put it on the table for bring it to the attention to this group and see what you generally are. The current proposal is that for all the standard track, it's based on enough discussion and implementations to advance to final. And for meta and informal, it would be more editorial agreements and consensus and wait even longer. So yeah, I would just pause here to see what you think.
I don't want to add any more requirements that make it more difficult to get an EIP finalized. And I think we make it very clear that final is not an indicator of adoption or use or quality of the EIP's like technical merits. It's just a statement about like if it's going to change or not. And I think adding like multiple requirements for like implementations or having certain levels of adoption before we move to final, I think that's going to be too taxing on the EIP process. And I think like what benefit is it going to bring us? It's going to bring us that most standards, like even more standards, don't make it through the process and just sit in draft or in review for longer periods of time. I don't think it's going to help anything. And on the like minimum length of time between changing statuses, I think that's, I don't know. It just seems like adding delays for no reason. Maybe we need to do a better job of as editors of making sure that sufficient discussion has taken place. But I don't think a time bound is going to change anything. Like EIPIP 712 was sitting in stagnant for years, and it still ended up a mess. Like I don't think a time limit is going to improve anything if more people aren't looking at it.
I heard Sam says didn't want to tax authors more for creating a barrier to advance to final, so that we don't have a lot of VIP laying at like draft or review status. Yeah, what do Greg and Matt think?
I mostly echo what Sam said. I really think that we spent a lot of time trying to separate the concept of like readiness from EIPs and just have it, moving something to a place that's fixed and then letting like the readiness be defined outside the process. So I think this is a regression in that sense.
Yeah, how about Greg?
I think Greg just. Oh no, you're just have Pooja's icon again.
That's funny again.
Um,
Greg, yeah.
Yeah, I don't have a really strong opinion on this, except, yeah, not too many more obstacles.
Yeah, my intention is not just to react. My intention is not to kind of propose something to add obstacles, but every once in a while I heard, for example, editors or other authors comes in and says, why is this even, this EIP even worthy? That's one thing. And then that creates a lot of debate. If we can say the worthiness is not going to be controlled unilaterally by either the author or by the editors, that would be a good thing. Because I on one side I worry that if we just allowed authors to propose EIPs, and then there would be like unless you guys are all super open, which I can also turn into, but then we would be anticipating like 10,000 level order of magnitude 10,000 of EIPs coming in, and I doubt if that is what this repository wants. And the other thing is that either we let editors single-handedly or as a group decide whether an EIP is worthy. It's also kind of placing a lot of burden as well as a lot of single subjective bias to EIP editors. Some may argue that how about we look at the thread and see who is on the discussion, and that's still very subjective. And therefore, the worthiness, we were trying to look for something that is more objective in determining worthiness. Readiness is the same. We've seen interfaces that was not even compilable in readiness, and then it's still made into final. And so that's why we want to like propose some of the implementation requirements to at least make sure that it works.
Do we ever determine worthiness?
Some, I think, implied like one of the EIPs that I interact with being asked by an editor, like, is it useful or is it worthy? And that may, if that is a technical peer feedback, that's fine. But as an editor asking that might imply that there's a gap editorially to enter an EIP.
Yeah, so I think, asking if an EIP is worthy or not is fine. But if the author says yes, then I don't think any of us will stop it from going through. The only time I think we would stop it is for EIPs that are not expected to have multiple implementations that have to like interop. That is, I think, the only bar for worthiness that we
But-
enforce.
That's true. That's right. But that's pretty subjective, right? Like, how do you know if there is going to be or going to not be
It's not
multiple
whether there
implementations?
it's not whether there will be or won't be. It's whether the like whether the proposal standardizes something that would have multiple implementations. Like even if there's only ever one implementation of it and it's by the EIP author, that's fine. If you
Mhm.
standardize it, it's whether or not like there's the expectation that somebody else could come along and make another compatible implementation.
Well, for me, I'm okay to reduce that down to one implementation. I'm more in favor of having multiple one, but I think it's okay to require at least one. But we've also seen EIPs go in without like showing or without having an implementations and finalized. And that's what I felt the
Is that a
lack,
problem?
the gap. I think one thing could happen is that EIP did not work. Like that specification did not work and waste editors or future authors' time to look into, like waste not author but client implementers time to look into, right? A final EIP that doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean that is kind of annoying, and I mean that's kind of what the discussion threads are for. Like if an EIP doesn't work, somebody on there probably would have said something, and hopefully, can a final EIP be withdrawn? Is that allowed? How does that work?
Yeah, that's why I'm trying to like I do hear the sentiment in this room today, that you don't want to add hurdles to authors. I'm fully in that. I'd love to have authors be more easier to make it easier for them to propose and work through. I consider myself mostly an author, but I just want to like put it here and then see maybe 6 months from now this will come back up, and then we can continue to use that as a basis to discuss what kind of criteria we want to require for advancing at status. Anytime anyone, if they complain about why something goes into final too fast or too slow, maybe we can use that thread as a discussion. How can we better improve our process to set an expectation and um, and standards for something to be expected for the status advancing to be expected.
If I may say, here, I am not sure of any EIP so far which has been into final status and it was like not working. So the idea of standardizing is to have a standardized process in place, like the codes in place for which any implementer, any DApp developer may pick up that standard and try to add it to the project if they won't want to integrate that concept into that project. And adding too much boundaries for people to even submit a proposal to become a standard is something I think is not very fair to them. However, I am open to the idea, like when we have these kind of examples, we can probably come up with some other policies, just like Sam mentioned, that if we can have finally EIP be withdrawn. So if we found, like if we come across a proposal which is actually not functional, which I think is not going to happen because multiple eyes are there on any proposal, the moment it enter into a pull request or goes to a fellowship of Ethereum magicians. So that's rare of rarest case that a proposal could get into the final status, and for that we should not increase our boundaries. However, I am into favor of like kind of defining not defining or maybe setting hard line over there, but a general idea of getting more discussion into discussion thread. If I have not mistaken, this proposal idea may have been fired by a pull request that I found for a meta EIP, which is currently into last call, and it would be finishing its last call under 30 days, which I really think is not a good idea for proposals under meta category, because that is process related proposal should be discussed in EIPIP meeting. So we can think of something around like how we can increase the length of discussion, but not hard coding that length of discussion onto the EIP one is my thought there.
We have started the peer review process where we nominate people from the list, so I think that'll help a little bit. You know, not for meta EIPs, obviously, but for for regular ones.
Hmm.
Right. Meta EIP is mostly related to process, so I think EIP editors must look into it. And any meta EIP should not get into a final status in less than a month or so. So
Yeah, I'm
that's-
even in favor of setting it as a 60 days for meta, because if something is procedural, it should take longer it should let more authors know. And authors don't like editors who look at the EIP repository and discussion so frequently.
Hmm.
it just comes to my mind that the period of 14 days definitely give us one EIPIP meeting in between last call to final status. I mean, obviously I can bring it up in the meeting, but yeah. Any other thoughts on there?
Yeah, I agree that some arbitrary period of time doesn't necessarily help. That there's a bigger issue. There's a bigger issue with these as to whether we really should have an implementation before it goes final. With core EIPs, by the time it goes final, it's on the mainnet. And an ERC is a lot more useful if there isn't an implementation and people know it works. Yeah, for ANSI standards work, we would not accept library proposals, which were our non-core proposals, and we would not accept them without, well, I shouldn't say not. Our strong desire was to have an implementation to standardize what was already implemented. So it would seem reasonable to generally not go to last call, or at least not come out of it without an implementation. That would be an indicator as to whether there was enough interest to proceed. If nobody wants to implement it, what's the point?
Yeah, that's what I felt too. And by the way, this is not just to kind of add hurdle for something to be proposed. This is just adding some bar for something to finalize. And just to want to make the distinction clear.
So my general understanding of timeline here is from a proposal when it is added to a GitHub repository till the time it reaches last call. Generally, they take 3 to 4 weeks in normal cases. Like sometimes there are a lot of proposals. It takes time to review all these proposals and all. And on top of that, if we add 60 days for final call, I mean like last call, that would defining the length of any meta or informational EIP cannot be less than 3 months. And sometimes if the initial period is over a month, say for example, it is 2 or 3 months already, then adding additional 2 months will be like maybe author may lose interest in pursuing the proposal, and that will stagnate. And even if it is a good proposal, author may lose interest. So generally speaking, not in favor of setting a hard set boundary over there of 60 days. However, yeah, I think the process that was discussed in the last meeting of peer reviewer and adding more reviewer will be good idea. For having implementation, core EIPs follow a little different process. So we can just exclude that because that is to be implemented by the client team. For ERC, I think we discussed in the last meeting as well that having maybe a prototype of that would be also a good idea, or yeah, having a strong discussion on that would be a good idea. But waiting till the implementation is ready because the proposer may not have time and bandwidth to implement it. He or she may have to find someone else to get it implemented on a project level.
I agree to most of the points. The matter of waiting for 60 days, you mentioned that the author may lose their interest in pursuing. I think if you're proposing a matter which is affect, not to say those old matter that's only recording the hard fork, but then in the latest status, we mostly use meta for procedure, right? If someone propose a meta EIP and lose interest in the future after just 60 days, I don't think that is a strong enough interest for on the other hand, if something is really important and has a lot of consensus by this group, even if the author lose interest, the matter in AIP can still advance to final, right? If they get into the last call sufficiently, because the group will also continue to take on and just finalize it, just like we see for other standard EIPs. I wouldn't feel too uncomfortable for we to require a longer waiting period of time for people to give feedback for Meta. For informational, I really don't care because it's non-binding. I even think all informational should only be live and okay to subject to future change. But yeah, that's my opinion.
Well, we are very close to time. So if anyone would like to give final piece of thought and feedback here, we do not have any pull requests, so we do not have to make any decision. However, we do have a discussion thread of at Fellowship of Ethereum Magician, and link can be found in agenda. So people can definitely add their thoughts there. But yeah, if anyone would like to give any final piece of feedback. Okay. So I think we can continue collecting more feedbacks, and we'll try to revisit this discussion in future meeting. For today's meeting, I also wanted to bring another issue for discussion. I know we don't have time to finish up the discussion, but at least we can collect initial feedback on that. Okay, that is related to EIP bot. I'm skipping one item. I'm going to item number 3 directly. Requires section that we discussed briefly in the EIP editing office hour. So for required section at present, the EIPW bot allows final, stagnant, and withdrawn EIP. My proposal here is that withdrawn EIP may be removed from there because a withdrawn EIP may not have necessarily followed throughout the steps of a standardization and may not be ready to be an EIP which can be considered for dependency. I have created an issue for that. Issue number is 6131. If anyone has any thoughts, comments to add.
So I guess the rule would be withdrawn EIPs are allowed to have withdrawn EIPs, and that requires preamble header, but no other EIPs are. Is everybody okay with that?
Yeah, I think that is a better wording of it. Yeah, thank you, Sam, for correcting it. Greg and Victor, if you have any objection on that or maybe on thought.
Sorry, I was taking notes on the previous discussion. Yeah, I'll take a look. You can proceed to next item.
I think this is the last one.
Yeah, I think, yeah, anyway, we are out of time. So I have added the issue number. It is 6131. Maybe we can wait for more thoughts there. If nobody objects, then hopefully we can make this change. Is that?
I think it's very very relevant. It's very good. I'm in full support of it. Should we also avoid the stagnant being referenced as required?
My concern here is that one author can pull in another EIP as a requirement at a stage, like if they're both in draft, say, which is not a problem. And then the one that they're referring to requiring falls into stagnant or gets withdrawn. And then what does the original author have to do?
One correction I would like to mention here, like by mistake, I said the current EIPW allows for final, withdrawn, and stagnant. Actually, it is final, living, and withdrawn. Stagnant is not considered in the first place. So the only status which is under question is withdrawn. Should it allow withdrawn in the required section or should not?
Well, probably not. But maybe this is an old worry, but it is a pain if you refer to another draft and the draft slips off to stagnant. Should you have to go take over what went stagnant and make it a draft again in order for your proposal to proceed?
Yeah, at present, it is not allowing draft at all, only final and living proposals.
I'm in favor of letting draft and review statuses be as flexible as possible and reference anything, like even if it's stagnant or I'm okay to ban or not ban withdrawn, but I think if we give draft and review bigger flexibility, that's okay. I think for last call, to getting into last call, they want to make sure that the required EIP, EIP being depend on should also be in at least last call. Because something going to last call is soon to finalize and should be treated more seriously. And if at that point something's still either stagnant or withdrawn, the author should feel enough, either remove them or remove the requires if it's not a hard dependency, or be motivated enough to pull and take over and then drive that into last call if the depending EIP is a requirement.
I think that would be too much of hassle for editors if we start allowing draft and review, because as Greg was mentioning that there are chances that they may end up on withdrawn or stagnant. So to be on the safer side, I think it's a good idea for bot to allow only final and living. And yeah, even withdrawn can be taken out, except for the withdrawn proposal.
Well, I think what I said is for bots to not even complain for draft and reviews. Like for if this EIP is in draft status or reviews,
So
just don't complain about requires.
So review, I think we have to have the restriction because like if it's in the requires header, it's required reading, like it's necessary to understand the current EIP. So if the current EIP is ready for review, that means all of its dependencies also need to be ready for review. Like you can't review an EIP, the one you're looking at right now, if its dependencies are still allowed to change freely. Like they have to move in somewhat of a lockstep here. Like for draft, it's fine. Like draft can refer to draft, obviously, but yeah. So
Yeah, I don't have a problem with draft referring to something in any state. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. So draft and stagnant can refer to anything.
and yeah, that just means if you want to move out of draft into review, yeah, you'll have to somehow resurrect what slipped out of draft. But okay, I think I understand.
Cool. So I have to drop off. Sorry, guys, but thanks for coming out. Talk to you soon.
Yeah, I think, thank you, everyone. I'm not sure when the next meeting will be because it is falling on vacation time. So maybe I can take a poll or ask people on the group and see if we would like to keep the next meeting on 28th or in January. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Have a good one.
Thank you, Hoja.